So Purim is coming up in a couple of weeks, and part of the preceding Purim every year is we have Tainus Esther, known as the Fast of Esther. In general, in Judaism, we have different types of fast days. We only have one biblical fast day, and that is Yom Kippur. And then we have the four fast days, which are Zeichel Churban, as the Navi tells us in Zechariah, Som HaRavi, Som HaRavi, Som HaChamishi, Som HaShvi, Som HaSiri. The Som in the fourth, Yud Zayin Tammuz, the Som in the fifth month, Tisha B'Av, Som HaShvi, Som Gedalia, and Som HaSir Asar B'Teves. So clearly at one point they will be divrei Kabbalah because they're words of the prophets. That's the whole Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, how they point out an apparent contradiction. On one hand, the pasuk says Som. At the end of the pasuk, it says V'sasanu V'simcha. So which one is it? Are they happy days or are they sad days? So Gemara says it depends. There are different levels. In the time of the Beis HaMikdash is up, they're all holidays. They're Yom Tov and we celebrate. But when the time of religious persecution, they're all somos. And there's a middle ground when there's no religious persecution and there's no Beis HaMikdash, as many say like today. So then the Gemara says, Ratzu Misana, Ratzu Einu Misana. Midina Gemara, it's not optional for us, because we've taken upon our good senses that we fast anyway, but Midina Gemara, 3 of those 4 fast days are optional. Inami Tisha B'Av, so why not Tisha B'Av? The Gemara says because Huchpalo sorrows, double trouble happened on that day, both temples. So Tisha B'Av is singled out, and we know that Tisha B'Av is it's the most similar to Tisha B'Av. On one hand, it's the Yom Kippur. It's the most similar and perhaps the most different, meaning functionally it looks the same, but fundamentally they're polar opposites. Yom Kippur is the happiest day of the year. Tisha B'Av is a universal day of Avelos. In fact, according to some Rishonim, even Bizman Bayesheni, that's the question, did they observe Tisha B'Av as a fast day or not? Because some say besides it being a day for the temple destruction, it's a universal day. So that's a shiloh whether Tisha B'Av was ever celebrated or not. But Tisha B'Av is more strict than the other ones. We started at night, etc. So that's a discussion in the Gemara, in the Rishonim, Achronim, whether Tisha B'Av retains its divrei Kabbalah status. That's why it's more strict. Or no, it's D'Rabbanan like all the other ones, but with this Midrabanan we were Machmir. So either way, Yom Kippur's our Torah, the 4 fast days, at one point we were divrei Kabbalah. Tisha B'Av may be still divrei Kabbalah. And the other ones are this Ratzu Miksanim. They're optional within a Gemara, but kind of like Tfilas Aravis Rishus. It's a machokas in the Gemara about the status of Tfilas Aravis. We paskin Aravis is optional. What do you mean optional? What did I come here for? It was optional. No, it's not optional. Maybe it might be a good idea if it was optional, but it's not optional for us anymore. We've taken upon ourselves Shavya Lakachova, but Midina Gemara it's optional. Same thing here. Yeah, and that's why there's much more room to be makel in terms of eating on those days. Someone's achol shein bo sakana. In other words, you need a lot less going against you to eat on the 3 fast days than Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av already, again, Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur are also much different because Tisha B'Av Pash is only D'Rabbanan and Yom Kippur is D'Oraisa. So there are many differences between Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur, but as well between Tisha B'Av and the other fast days, there are many people, many women, certain women who don't fast at all because of different things they have. And men, it's not limited to women, it'd be to men also, but there's more room for women as well. Some say perhaps women never took it upon themselves as kind of like some say similar by Ma'ariv. Some say women have to, again, it gets into how much a woman has to daven, but some say Shacharis and Mincha. What about Ma'ariv? So they say it was what the women never accepted upon themselves as a chova. Men did, but not women. It's a similar idea here. By the fast days, some want to claim the women never accepted the other 3 fast days. That's why they're, especially in Hasidic circles, Others say it's a more pragmatic thing. They're always having kids, so either they were nursing, pregnant, so they're always exempt from all the fast. Whatever the reason given, the bottom line is, strictly speaking, Medina Gemara, everyone's exempt. We paskin, we have to fast, but obviously there are leniencies in terms of it's not Tisha B'Av and it's not Yom Kippur. So that's Yom Kippur is on its own level. Then you have Tisha B'Av, then you have the other three, and then we have another fast day, a sixth fast day called Tainus Esther. That's the fast we usually have on Yud Gimel Adar, the day before Purim. This year we'll see we have a problem because Yud Gimel Adar falls out on Shabbos, and we're not allowed to fast on Shabbos. Perhaps biblically speaking, it's definitely a bit to oneg, and according to some Rishonim, it's an Issa Daraisa. You aren't allowed to you violate a biblical prohibition by fasting on Shabbos. Either way, so therefore we can't have Tainus Esther on Shabbos. But I would have thought anyway, as the Gemara tells us by the Mishnah, the Gemara tells us by Tisha B'Av, when Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos, so when do we fast? We fast on Sunday. So I would have thought also when Purim falls out on Shabbos, well, it can't fall, the way our calendar is set up, it can't fall out on Shabbos in Hamilton. There's only one spot in the world that can fall out on Shabbos, and that is, well, any spot that reads on the 15th, I'll call it Yerushalayim. That's any walled city from the time of Yoshua ben Nun, then it can fall out on Shabbos, because the 15th, but in Yerushalayim, when Purim falls out on Shabbos, we don't do Tainus Esther on Sunday. In fact, it's a Purim Meshulash. It's a 3-day festivities here. They get into different opinions what you do on what day, but you split up the mitzvahs, the Shalach Manos, the Suda, Matoras, Rav Yonah, Megillah. You do things on different days, Al Anisim. So that's what they call Purim Meshulash. It's a 3-day holiday, and we don't fast on Sundays. So how come? So what do? We make it earlier. We'll see how early in a minute. So how come by Tisha B'Av we push it off, but by Tainus Esther we don't? Because why do we push it off by Tisha B'Av? Because that's Avelis. Avelis, it's Pernios Tisha B'Av, so we want to push it off. We want to push off bad tidings as far as we can. However, Tainus Esther is what they call a Tainus Shel Simcha. It's a happy occasion. We're celebrating that we won the war, etc. So therefore, we want to be makdim. And some say it's not. Others say it's not the reason we want to be makdim. Tisha B'Av, it's not necessarily because of Eilas. We don't want. There are other reasons why, but that's the standard reason given. So therefore, Tainus Esther will makdim because it's a Tainus Shel Simcha. It's also one of the weaker fastings. It's only a minhag. It's a discussion where it's alluded to in Megillah Esther, but there's no explicit pasuk talking about fasting on Yud Gimel Adar. They talk about, we fast to make, Esther might have fasted the 3 days during Pesach. Because it was a time of praying and festivity. The Jews might have been fasting Yud Gimel Adar when they were fighting the war. So we do it to Yud Gimel Adar. So generally speaking, we have Tainus Esther before. But if Purim would fall on Shabbos, we wouldn't do it on Shabbos. So it's a machlokas rishonim whether we take it back to Friday or take it back to Thursday. Our practice we're familiar with, or if you're not, this year Purim Tainus Esther will be on Thursday. But that's not so simple. Some rishonim say you take it back to the earliest day, you take it back to Friday. Others say no. They bring up another, you're not allowed to fast on Friday. The only time we fast on, well, I don't say you're not allowed to fast on Friday. Generally speaking, we try to avoid fasting on Friday because the only exception to the rule is Asara B'Tevis. Asara B'Tevis, when it falls out, there's a famous Avid Draham who writes a bigger Chiddush, but he was smart, you can't disprove him because it can't happen. That he writes, if Asara B'Tevis would fall on Shabbos, you'd fast on Shabbos. We know only Yom Kippur we fast. And he said, why he compares Yom Kippur to Asara B'Tevis, Asara B'Tevis, because it says, Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh. So he says, you dafka have to fast on that day. So he says, you know what? If Asara B'Tevis fell out on Shabbos, we would fast, we don't have to worry, it can't, so he has a reprieve. However, what is true is that we do fast on Friday, which is something we usually don't do. So at least he has some teeth to what he's saying. Other Rishonim said, no, you fast Tanya Sester on Friday. And other Rishonim say, no, we don't want to go in, it's not the way to enter Shabbos fasting and hungry, bitu yonig Shabbos, so therefore we don't want you fasting. And we have it both ways, not to fast on Friday, and some say not to eat too much on Friday. In fact, the Magen Avraham has a minig not to eat any meat on Friday, because you should save the meat, for Friday night for in terms of that. Of course, there's a mitzvah of tamil. There's a mitzvah of tasting your food if you're making it, so that's okay. But even according to the Magen Avraham, I'm assuming that's not eating. That's only te'ima. But either way, I don't know if that's the minhag or not. People don't have meat on, but that's the Magen Avraham brings. So you have people in both directions. So the machlokas rishonim whether Taanis Esther should be Friday or Thursday. Our minhag seems to be Thursday. Or B, the Achronim point out, I think the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch brings down, or Chai Adam, that if a person, whatever reason, doesn't fast on Thursday, they forgot, then they should fast on Friday. In other words, either way works. Our minhag is we just pick Thursday. In fact, Rav Soloveitchik used to quote his grandfather, Rav Chaim Soloveitchik. He took it so far that we all know on a Taanis, we read Kriyas HaTorah in the morning, and we read it at Mincha as well. So this day will be Thursday. So anyway, we have a Kriyas HaTorah, even though we're going to read a different Kriyas HaTorah on Taanis Esther. But the bottom line, it's a day which is Yemechuyev in Kriyas HaTorah. However, when it comes to Mincha, the only time we read Kriyas HaTorah at Mincha is when? When do we usually read Kriyas HaTorah at Mincha? What days of the year? Right, so every Shabbos. But in addition to Shabbos, we read it on Yom Kippur, and we read it on all the Taanis Sibur, all the fast days. In fact, that's a famous issue, Rabbi Kiva Eger, the Chasim Sofer, in terms of when we're reading Mincha Yom Kippur, we know there's a Yamim Noram tune. I say, Baruch Hu Es Hashem, Amen Baruch, sounds something like that. Or the classic, Baruch Hu Es Hashem, Amen. So the question is, what is the Baal Korei Lane, and which on Mincha Yom Kippur? Do you go with the Yamim Noram tune, or you go with the regular tune? So it's a discussion, different minhagim, but what's the issue? The issue is, Rabbi Kiva Eger raises, is what is the nature of the Kriya on Mincha Yom Kippur? Why are we reading the Torah on Mincha Yom Kippur? Is it because like Shabbos, that Yom Kippur is like Shabbos and we're reading it Midin Kedushas Hayom? Well, no. Yom Kippur is a Taanis Sibur, it's a Din Taanis, and that's my nafkamina. What's the difference? I have to read. I'm going to read anyway. So Rav Soloveitchik points out perhaps the Marcheshes brings it down. Perhaps the niggin would be different. In fact, even though so I'm a Levi, so by that time it's already taken care of. Albeit, interesting enough, I was davening when I was learning in a Rabbi at YU for many years. I used to daven there Yom Kippur when I was married. They're living there. So I got Levi Mincha Yom Kippur in the Beis HaMedrash. So that was good. So the Kohen went with, I was hoping the Baal Korei went with the regular niggin. That's what I was hoping for. And then Rav David Lipschitz, the Suvak Rav, I don't know if you heard of him. He was a big Rav in Europe, and he got Yisrael. And I remember him doing the Yamim Noram niggin. So either he didn't hold from the Lamdis, or he thought the meaning should be that everybody should be doing Yamim Noram. So either way, that's a discussion. So one issue is the niggin. Another nafkamina is the brachas of the Haftorah. Because a mincha of a Taanis we read the Haftorah also. So during the Haftorah we finish Magen David. On Shabbos we say Makadesh HaShabbos. So what do we do on Mincha Yom Kippur? So that's actually a machlokas mechaber Ramah, Sfardi Ashkenaz. The Sfardim do the whole thing, and the Ramah says Magin David. So it seems to be the Nakudas HaMachlokas between the Mechaber and the Ramah is the Mechaber seems to be saying it's a din of Kedushas Hayom, so you do the regular. And the Ramah says no, it's a din, they should go together. And perhaps a third issue, which is also fundamental, is someone who isn't fasting on Yom Kippur. I don't mean someone who's eating, who shouldn't be eating. I don't mean someone who's eating, I don't mean someone who should be fasting and he's eating and he's doing a lahachas. You're probably not going to give that person an aliyah on Yom Kippur anyway. I'm talking about someone who, al pi halacha, he's allowed to eat. He's a cholosh yesh bo sakana, he's a cholosh ein bo sakana. He's eating because he has a chiyuv to eat. In fact, not only is he allowed to, he has to eat. Could he get an aliyah? So again, that gets into that gets into if someone eats, are they still considered a bar chiyuva? But that's in the Kudas HaMachlokas, is if you hold it's midin tainus, and then obviously he's not fasting, no fault of his own, but he's not, and therefore you don't give him an aliyah. If it's midin kedushas hayom, that's why Rabbi Akiva Eiger raises the shaila. The Chasim Sofer seems to even go more. He even says on Tisha B'Av he took an aliyah, implying that he felt that anyway you still a mechuyev b'davar even if you're eating, because even though he ate on Tisha B'Av, he still kept the other inuyim. So in the other fast days we could discuss it. But let's say Tainus Esther, someone eats, someone who's allowed to eat on Tainus Esther. So Tainus Esther, we're reading Mincha, Pashitz is Midin Tainus. So the minig seems to be one does not get an aliyah if you're eating. Push comes to shove. That's maybe different minhagim if you're the only person. So I guess it's a separate child. If no one's fasting, is there a Kriyas Torah, or how many do you need to fast? So that's a discussion. There's a famous Yisrael Salanter who says the halach is you need to do benching to say Elokeinu. So they bring down you need 7 people eating, but on let's say a fast day to read, let's say you only need or read at least to get. You need 6 people fasting. So if Salant asks, how come 6 by fasting but 7 by benching? So Rabbi Salant says Derek Jush because HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us more when we're eating than we're fasting. So when it comes to eating, he wants 7 people eating. He's not so happy when we're fasting, so therefore only 6. But either way, so that's a whole discussion there. The minig is not to give someone an aliyah if they're eating. If they're eating, let's say, Shacharis is more of an issue. Let's say on Monday and Thursday, maybe the Chayim Midin Kriyat. So, different minhagim. The minig seems to be. It's all based on the Beis Yosef brings down on Bahab. Bahab is, I don't even know if you know of Bahab, maybe from the yeshiva days. That's how I know about it from. Monday, Thursday, and Monday after the holidays, the Shalosh Regalim, because we are overjoyed with Simcha, Basar, Yayin, so we might have done something wrong. So therefore we have a fast day. Well, we don't fast anymore today, but the original din of Bahaba is fasting, slichos. Today in some yeshivas, if you're lucky, no one I know fasts, but they do slichos. In fact, I remember one day, it was actually the same base on Medrash, I was with David, it was Bahab and it was, I think, Yom HaAtzmaut that day. So I'm not saying what Rav David did, but his minyan, they did slichos and they did hala that day in the same minyan. And not necessarily antachanan, not that they're a thera, but that's what we did there. But either way, so Bahab was that you used to fast, and you had your own, it was a separate, you read from the Tainus, Seaboard Kriyas Torah. So the Beis Yosef quotes that if on Bahab, if someone eats on Bahab, they can't get an aliyah. So therefore the question is how far, because the Bahab, all you have for Bahab is fasting. So if you're not fasting, it's nothing. So therefore that would seem to apply, by the other fasts, maybe Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur. So that's the whole discussion there. So the Rabbi used to quote, and he was makpid, that since it's a machlokas rishonim on when Tainus S is supposed to be this year, whether it's to be Thursday and Friday, so he tried to avoid, I guess if he was the only Levi in the minyan, I don't know what he did, but he avoided getting an aliyah for mincha of the Tainus, because he was choshesh for perhaps a suffix bracha levatala, that perhaps really, at shacharis it's not an issue you're reading anyway, but mincha, I'm only reading because maybe really Tainis Hester is Friday, not Thursday. He tried to avoid the minig, obviously it's not like him. My minig is to take the aliyah. When they call me up mincha, I don't tell them not to give me an aliyah. My minig is to take it as well. That seems to be the minig Israel, but maybe if you're a real brisker, then they stay away from the minig. To summarize, we discussed the difference. Tainis Esther is the Tainis Shel Simcha. Therefore, we bring it early. Tisha B'av, you pushed off. We pushed off Prunios. Went into different types of Tainios. The differences between Yom Kippur, the four fast days, and Tainis Esther, because Tainis is a Tainis Shel Simcha, and therefore we always want to make it earlier. It's a shaila whether you can fast on. Generally, do we fast on Friday? As Sarah B'Teis we do. That could be an exception to the rule. Be'etzem hayom hazeh. Some Rishonim say no, you fast on Friday, and therefore Tainis Esther should be on Friday. And we go with the prevalent meaning that no, that we don't like fasting, we don't like eating too much on Friday, we don't like fasting on Friday. It's going to take away from, it'll be bittul and Shabbos. Our meaning is to observe Tainis Esther on Thursday. And the briskers, the Rav Chaim, the Rav had a kapeda that they try to avoid, they will be him also. They try to avoid getting, I guess the Rabbi knew not to call him up for Levi on mincha of Tainis Esther. And again, it's only on a regular Tainis Esther, because it's not a shaila on Yud Gimel Adar. Then I'm sure he took the aliyah. The shaila is only this year when it's not on its regular. It's when any day that Tainis Esther isn't on Yud Gimel Adar. That's what. So if in theory if Purim could fall on Shabbos, or and clear when it falls on Sunday, we have to move it up to either Thursday or Friday, and therefore that's our meaning. So the good news about it is it makes Megillah a lot easier because Megillah Esther is not so bad. But the problem is, if you're fasting and you go right from Megillah Esther to Megillah, a lot of people are very tired. So in that sense, it's very good. You get to eat. You're on a full belly from Shabbos, Shalashidis, and then you go straight into. In fact, this is the opposite. I don't even want to eat after. I'm full already, as opposed to Megillah Esther already. No matter when it is, even whether it's over, whether it's before the clock change or after, it's hard listening to the Megillah. And strictly speaking, Tainis Esther is over. You're allowed to eat before Megillah Esther. The only reason you don't eat, our meaning is not eat, is because before you have a mitzvah, you're not supposed to eat. So again, like that person's not feeling well, and that's definitely number one, te'ima you can do, and obviously you're not really feeling well, you could eat. But te'ima, the much poskim are more makel, have a little drink, take some juice if you're feeling faint. And it doesn't make any sense, that you're not going to be able to listen to Kriyas HaMegillah, which perhaps is a mitzvah midivrei Kabbalah, and do that properly over, again, because Tainis Esther is over. It's not an issue. The only issue, the problem you have Saturday night, which isn't really a problem because I'm assuming you won't be to Havdalah. You can't eat before Havdalah, in terms of that. But those are some of the issues with Tainis Esther in general, and specifically this year when Tainis Esther is on Thursday. Megillah Nikris B'Yid Aleph B'Yid Beis B'Yid Gimel B'Yid Daled B'Tisvav Pachas V'Lo Yot Yoter. The Mishnah begins in the beginning of Maseches Megillah, the days when one reads Megillah Esther. We know there's a mitzvah to read Megillah Esther on Purim, based on the pasuk in Megillah Esther, and that's a discussion in terms of the Rishonim, Achronim. What is the status of reading Megillah Esther? Because Megillah Esther is in the Nach. We know mitzvahs given in the Torah are midivrei Torah. Mitzvahs the rabbis give us are mitzvahs midrabanan. The question of divrei Kabbalah, what is the status of Mikra Megillah? Whether divrei Kabbalah kedivrei Torah dami, or divrei Torah kedrabanan dami, we'll go into. Seems to be a machlokas harishonim in terms of which direction you go, and the different nafkaminas we'll have to speak about. So either way, the Mishnah says Megillah is read as early as 11 and as late as 15, even though in extreme cases, so on Yud Aleph Yud Beis Yud Gimel, you'd read it without a bracha. But on certain extreme cases, someone had to leave, well, even before, so then perhaps one could read the Megillah even then. Perhaps not B'Torah Tzchiyah, maybe it's a din of Tashlumin even before it happens, but either way, that's a rare exception, and the rule is basically you read from the 11 to the 15. And so when do we only read on the 14th and the 15th? What's this 11, 12, and 13? So the Mishnah says, Krachat HaMukvin Choma B'Yeshua Ben Nun, Korah Mitezvav. Wall says on the top of Yeshua Ben Nun, read on the 15th, Tezvav, and Kfarim, Aras, Gedolas, Korah regular villages and cities read on the 14th. Ela Shakfarim Magdim in the Yom HaKnisa. But the small villages they read earlier. So, but the Mishnah says, and the Gemara elaborates that on the Yom HaKnisa they used to come in anyway Mondays and Thursdays for other matters, to take care of business and other issues. So therefore, once they were coming in Yom HaKnisa, they said that they could read the Megillah. So let's say Thursday is the 12th of the month. So Yud Al and Yud Beis Adar, they were permitted to read the Megillah. That's the Mishnah. It's a major machlokas Rashi and Tosfos who read the Megillah, meaning who was actually the Baal Koreh, who was the one actually reading the Megillah. So Rashi writes it was the Bnei Ha'ir. They used to come in, and the Bnei Ha'ir used to read the Megillah for them, because they didn't know how to read. Apparently, they're Eino B'kiyam. They didn't know how to read. As Rashi quotes, Kvarim Eino B'kiyam Likros V'tzrichan Sheyikreno Lahem Echad Bnei Ha'ir. And Lo Hitzricham Chachamim was Acher V'Lavo V'Yom Yudalid, and they didn't want to bother them to come in again anyway. So that's what Rashi writes. The Bnei Ha'ir used to read the Megillah for the Kvarim. Tosfos in Yevamos is Cholek on Rashi. He says, what are you talking about? How could Bnei Ha'ir read the Megillah for the Bnei HaKvarim? We have a principle, the Mishnah tells us in Rosh Hashanah and the Gemara throughout Shas, an Eino Mechuyev B'davar cannot do a mitzvah for a Mechuyev B'davar. Someone who's not obligated in the mitzvah can't do a mitzvah for someone else. So if Bnei Ha'ir, the Chiyuv is on day 14, and today's day 11, 12, or 13, so Bnei Kfarim HaChayiv today, Bnei Ha'ir are in, how could Bnei Ha'ir read the Megillah for Bnei Kfarim? That's Tosfos Kasha. Hence he rejects Rashi and says, what are you talking about? Bnei HaKfarim read it themselves. They knew how to read. If they did it themselves, why do they have to come into the city to do it? Do it where they live. So apparently it was very spread out, and it was hard to find a common place for people to meet in these little places. So I guess pragmatically, the best idea was everyone meet in the big city and we'll read the Megillah together. But Tosfos says it was the Bnei Kfar who read it, because he quotes the Yerushalmi that says, Yerushalmi writes, a Ben Krach can't read for a Ben Ha'ir, and a Ben Ha'ir can't read for a Ben Krach. In other words, someone who lives in a city which is walled from the time of Yeshua Ben Nun, his Chiyuv is on the 15th. Someone on a regular city is on the 14th. So someone who's Mechuyev on the 15th can't read it for someone on the 14th, and someone who's Mechuyev on the 14th can't read the Megillah for someone who's Chayev on the 15th. So Tosfos goes to Yerushalmi, so too, a Ben Ha'ir can't read for a Ben Kfar. So it's a major machlokas, Rashi and Tosfos, on who read the Megillah for the villages, either according to Rashi, Bnei Ha'ir, according to Tosfos, Bnei HaKfarim. What is in the Kudas HaMachlokas? What is the issue here? What does Rashi do with the Taina of Tosfos? You're an Eino Mechuyev B'davar. How could you do it? So number one is, that could be part of the Geder, what is considered Eino Mechuyev B'davar. In other words, maybe it's a generic machlokes, that B'nai Eir are chayav in Kriyas HaMegillah. The fact that the day is different, so maybe the cholek on the Yerushalmi, and perhaps maybe even they'd agree that a ben krach career for B'nai Eir. Maybe in general you still consider a mechuyev b'davar, chayishal reivim zelazeh, you mechuyev b'davar, and you could wait for someone else. And Tosfos holds no, that there wouldn't be, or perhaps it's not even we agree with the Yerushalmi. The Bavli is not cholek on the Yerushalmi. That everyone agrees that ben krach can't read for a ben ear. But the Nekudas HaMachlokas is here is, what is the status of B'nai Kfarim? It's true they're reading at 11, 12, and 13, but that's a special dispensation. Really, they're considered a B'nai Eir. It's a special dispensation for the Megillah Haraya. When are they actually doing the Suda, the Matanos Lavyonim? So perhaps Matanos Lavyonim in general is associated with the Megillah. So whether they actually gave Matanos Lavyonim on that day or on the actual Purim, perhaps there's a discussion, because the Gemara says one of the reasons why we don't read Megillah on Shabbos is because Einayim Shel Aniyim, the poor people waiting to hear the Megillah, waiting to collect Matanos Lavyonim all year round. Imagine showing up on Shabbos and not getting anything. So we see a connection between Megillah Esther and Matanos Lavyonim, but clearly the Suda and the Shalach Manas, which is connected to the Suda as well, is on the next day. So we see really Tosfos holds, the Rashi holds, that basically they are mechuyev b'davar, because basically it's the same day. Even though a ben krach and a ben eir are, maybe Tosfos doesn't make that distinction. Others point out that maybe we're only dealing with the din d'Rabbanan here. So the rabbis, when they set up the institution on the Yud Aleph Yud Beis Yud Gimel, that was part of the takana, that a B'nai Eir would read for B'nai Kfarim. So different reasons given in the way to explain the Machlokes, Rashi and Tosfos regarding who reads the Megillah and the Nakuda there. Why from Yoshua ben Nun? In fact, there's a discussion in the Gemara, maybe it should be from Achashverosh. The Yerushalmi writes, because in order to give kavod to Eretz Yisrael, to give kavod to Eretz Yisrael, so therefore they said, you know what, how could it be Yisrael, during the time of the Purim story, Eretz Yisrael was desolate, was b'churbanon, there was no walled cities around, and therefore it wouldn't be proper kavod that was celebrating that we give more kavod to a mukvas chama at the time of Achashverosh and not to the time of Yeshua ben Nun. So it's kavod, tein kavod Eretz Yisrael. So therefore we went by when the time of Yeshua ben Nun. And why also Yeshua ben Nun? They point out he's the first one also to start the war against Amalek. So therefore, Parshas Mechiyas Amalek, Zechiras Amalek. So therefore that's a connection with Yehoshua ben Nun. In fact, there's a discussion. We see that parenthetic we'll have to go into it more as well, but it says Megillah Nikris B'Yid Aleph B'Yid Beis B'Yid Gimel, as opposed to, in contrast to the first Mishnah in contrast to the first Mishnah in Brachas, which says that Meimas Korin Shema. So, what's the chiluk? So the Ritva, the Rishon already say Ritva Rashba, and it's a Vilna Gaon that Meimas Korin, you're active. You have to actually do it yourself. There's no din of Shemea Ka'oneh by Kriya Shema. Masha'en came by Megillah. There is a din of Shemea Ka'oneh. And others point out, I think Rav Hutner, more b'machshava, that Korin is you actively do. You have to actually be makabel o malchus shamayim. However, regarding Megillah, it's Megillah Nikris. It looked like a coincidence. God's working behind the scenes. It was Hester Padim. It was hidden, and therefore it uses a lashon Nikris. And another distinction the Rishonim make is, so So even though the Rashba writes that so Megillah clearly you do it once a year, Mizman Lizman, so you make a Shachayanu. There's a Shayla on the next day. You also make a Shachayanu in the morning. But everyone you should make at least one Shachayanu. So the Shayla, the Rashba just points out, even though by Megillah it says you can read it on Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, Yud Gimel, Yud Aleph, Tet Zvav, so there are many days, but because the Rashba asks, how come there's no Shachiyanu on Biur Chametz? We only do that once a year. So some point out because it's a mitzvah hashchasa, that type of thing. But the Rashba answers because there's no set zman. Depending where you are, if you leave a couple of months before, a weeks before, perhaps you have the mitzvah of Biur Chametz. Now She'ein came by Megillah. It was Koveya, the Chazal said, this is this man, Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, Yud Gimel, Yud Aleph, Tet Zvav, even though it's different times, but yet we do make a Shachiyanu. And as well, there's a famous round that asks, why are we celebrating Purim on two different days? That Purim, we know, usually it's Torah Achasi, we all celebrate Purim at one time. So why are we celebrating here 2 days? 2 different days? So, different answers given by the different Mefarshim. One Zeichel and Nei, so since the miracle happened in different places for each place, and therefore that's the way they were Kovei it. But the Cheshek Shlomo, in the back, or Rav Shlomo Vilna, they point out that actually the Be'er Yosef as well, that why is it that it was set up on 2 different days? Since the Gemara tells us later on, there was a big issue about instituting a new holiday of Baal Tosef. So in order to avoid that issue, Chazal were out of the way to make sure they show that this Yom Tov is different than all others. And how do you do that? By making 2 different days. Just like we find by Chanukah, Mahajim and a Mahajim, we don't find that by other mitzvahs. So we see that Chazal went out of the way to make sure that we know we're doing a mitzvah midrabanan, and we don't want to call a mitzvah drabanan a mitzvah minatorah, and therefore to avoid the issue of Baal Tosef. And one more nakuda is that we know, so with Purim is 2 days, so the Chazon Ish has a chiddush, I think based on Yerushalmi, that the Koveya, how do you know what day you read on? Let's say you move around, you move from Tel Aviv to Yerushalayim back and forth, so the Chazon Ish writes the Koveya is the 14th in the morning. So wherever you are on the 14th in the morning, that's the Koveya. Actually, I think he says wherever you are that morning, that's the Koveya. And therefore, in theory, you could not have a Megillah, you could be Chayiv in Megillah reading 2 days or Chayiv in none, depending where you are. If you're in Yerushalayim on the 14th and on Tel Aviv on the 15th, so perhaps you wouldn't be Chayiv. However, that's not the standard, and Mr. Brewer and other poskim say no, is wherever you are on the 14th, that's Koveya, which day of Yontif that of Purim you celebrate. In fact, I think the Mumkacha points out similarly that for someone who comes to Eretz Yisrael, with Yontif Sheni and a Shalosh Regalim, so perhaps that the first day, the beginning of Sukkot is Koveya, so I think his shita was that, so then you only have to consider the resident, and therefore you only have to keep 1 day. The Mechaber, the Minig, again, even though it's becoming more popular now to keep 1 day, it's still the classical poskim, and the standard still is to keep up 2 days. Some the Soloveitchiks, the Briskers have a chumrah that they keep 1.5. Therefore, they keep the chumras of each day. But either way, they will have to continue. These are some of the issues regarding the beginning of Megillah, about which days we read the Megillah, why was it set up 2 separate days, what's the Lashon Nikris, why was every time Yeshua ben Nun, and the Machlokes Rashi and Tosfos regarding who reads the Megillah for the Bnei Kfarim. Is the Bnei Kfarim themselves, or is it Bnei Ha'ir? So the Mishnah begins in the beginning of Megillah When are the appropriate times to read the Megillah? So the Mishnah says, Megillah Nikris b'Yud Aleph, b'Yud Beis, b'Yud Gimel, b'Yud Daled, b'Tes Vav. The Mishnah lists 5 days when one can read the Megillah. 5 days. I know we're familiar with 2 days that in Yerushalayim, what we call Shushan Purim, which is real Purim for Jerusalem, they read on the 15th day of Adar. Everyone else reads on the 14th. You know, whether the city is in doubt, that's a separate question, but that's a specific suffix in the town. And so what is 11, 12, and 13? I'm not familiar with anyone reading 11, 12, and 13. So the Mishnah tells us it was a special dispensation for the villagers, these small towns, who were spread all over. Apparently they didn't have too many people, didn't have minyanim. Monday and Thursday they went into the big city anyway for some Torah, for shopping, for jobs, whatever they had to do. Market days on the Yom HaKnisa. So depending on when Purim fell out, so if it was a Monday or Thursday before Purim, within number 11, so that's when they used to go in and they used to hear the Megillah. So for the villages on 11, 12, and 13, it was a special dispensation. They heard the Megillah. And 14th and 15th are the regulars. In fact, there's a beautiful Cheshek Shlomo in the beginning of the Masechta who points out, guess how many times Purim, the word Purim, is mentioned in the Megillah Esther. How many times is the word Purim mentioned?
The whole word or just the shorish, the part of the word?
The whole word. So 5 times. 2 times it's spelled Malay with a Vav, and 3 times it's spelled Chasir without a Vav. It's still spelled Purim, but 2 with a Vav, 3 without. What's the pshat? So he says we have a general rule. When a word is spelled Malay, it means it's in the full sense of the word. When it's spelled Chasir, it's lacking in a certain way. So he says there's only 2 days of Purim, 14th and 15th. However, the other 3 days, they're not really Purim, they're only a quasi-Purim for the villagers who had to come in and read the Megillah early, so that's the 3 Purim spelled Chasir. So either way, that's the Mishnah Megillah. So the question is, who read the Megillah for these Bnei HaKfarim? So Rashi writes, so obviously the whole reason they came in, because they didn't know how to read the Megillah, they were Eino Bekiyim, they were not well versed, and therefore it was the Bnei Ha'ir, the people from the city came in. When they came into the city, the Bnei Ha'ir, the designated Baal Koreh, the people who knew how to learn, when they read for the Bnei HaKfar, that's how Rashi learns. Tosfos gets very upset. What are you talking about? How could the Bnei Ha'ir, how could the people in the city read for the villagers? We have a general rule. The Mishnah tells us in Rosh Hashanah that you have to be a mechuyev with davar. If I want to do a mitzvah for someone else, we have a general rule: Kol Yisrael arevim zeh lezeh. All Jews are responsible for one another. So on, let's say, Rosh Hashanah, if I blew the shofar 100 times and the shul block away doesn't have a Baal Tekiah, I have an obligation to go next door, blow the shofar another 100 times and make another bracha. Until every Jew in Hamilton hears shofar, my job is not fully completed. So we have a general rule of Yad Tzemotze. However, that's limited to someone who is obligated in the mitzvah. You have to be obligated in the mitzvah in order to be able to do it. So Tosfos says, he quotes a Yerushalmi, that let's say there's if a Ben Ir, someone who's chayiv to read on the 14th, ends up in Jerusalem on the 15th, could he read the Megillah? So the Yerushalmi says no. The Ben Ir cannot read the Megillah if it's someone on the 15th, and vice versa. Someone who's from Yerushalayim ends up in the 14th on Purim, he cannot read. A Ben Krak cannot read for a Ben Ir cannot. So too, Tosfos says, a Ben Ir cannot read for a Ben Akvar, and therefore he rejects Rashi's premise that Bnei Ha'ir reads. The question is, so who reads it if not Bnei Ha'ir? So Tosfos says no, it's the Bnei Kfarim read themselves. They weren't Amaratim, it wasn't they couldn't read Hebrew. It was just hard to get together. They couldn't get we try to read the Megillah with the minyan, and it's hard to get people together, all these little towns. There was no GPS then, no navis in the car, so it was much easier to meet in a central location. So it's a fundamental dispute between Rashi and Tosfos about who read the Megillah on these special days of 11, 12, and 13 for the small villages. Was it, as Rashi says, the actual people in the city read it? Or no, as Tosfos says, it's the villagers themselves. What is the issue here? What is the Nakudas HaMachlokes between Rashi and Tosfos? So some point out could be a general issue of how far we take the halacha of Eino Mechuyev B'Davar, that we said you have to be obligated in the mitzvah to do it for someone else. So the question is, what's considered obligated? In other words, every male, if for that matter every female, is chayiv in hearing the Mikra Megillah. The obligations might be different. Women might be obligated only in hearing, men are chayiv in reading, but every male has an obligation of reading the Megillah. Whether maybe the days are different, so Rashi apparently holds, as long as you're chayiv to read the Megillah, the fact you're on a different day, that's not a problem. You still consider the Mechuyev B'Davar, and therefore there's no problem. You can read for the villages. And Tosfos, quoting the Yerushalmi, seems to have a more limited definition of what's a Mechuyev. You have to be a Mechuyev B'Davar on that day for that mitzvah in order to do it for someone else. That's how some want to learn the Machlokas. Others want to say, no, maybe everybody agrees. In our case, that, or not everyone, at least Tosfos would say, that even though there's a Machlokas so the first way was that maybe it's a Machlokas Bavli in Yerushalmi, maybe the Bavli even holds a Ben Krach could do it for a Ben Ir, the way Rashi seems to learn, and it's a Machlokas Bavli Yerushalmi. Perhaps no, maybe everyone agrees to Yerushalmi that someone on the 14th can't read it for the 15th and vice versa. So why is B'nai Kfarim different? Because the Tosfos says, because really, B'nai Kfarim don't really, their day isn't 11, 12, or 13. The question is, when do they eat the Suda? When do they do Shalach Manas? So Ran writes, they do it on Yud Daled Adar. So really they're fundamentally no different than the regular city. In terms of the Chiyuv of Purim, they really have to celebrate on the 14th. It's a technical, special, local halacha regarding Mikra Megillah in order to make it easier to fulfill the Megillah, so they made a special dispensation. But fundamentally, it's not like that's why Purim is spelled Chaser. There's only 2 days of Purim. Even though we have a special dispensation to read the Megillah on 11, 12, and 13, that's not Purim for them. Purim is when they eat the Suda, when they do the other mitzvahs Hayom. In fact, there's an interesting discussion in the Achronim. What about the night Kriya? What did they do? The Mishnah doesn't mention what the villagers did the night. We know we read Purim, the night of Purim, and the next day, Chayav L'shnosa Balay, Chayav Balay L'shnosa Bayom. So, and in fact, the Mishnah later on in Megillah, which talks about the time of doing mitzvahs during the day, it talks about all the mitzvahs, but it talks about Megillah, and the general rule is, L'chadchila, we wait until sunrise to do a mitzvah of Lulav, of Milah, or Megillah. But B'diavad, the day begins at dawn, Alos HaShachar. So if you did the mitzvah after Alos HaShachar, you're okay. The reason for the concern, Rashi writes, is because it was, he doesn't write it, but it was before they had clocks and they didn't know exactly what time it was. It's pretty dark out at Alos HaShachar. It's pretty hard to tell when the exact moment of morning began and when night ended. So the rabbis were concerned, if you did it right at Alos HaShachar, you'll end up doing it at nighttime and doing the mitzvah at the wrong time. So they said basically, you should wait until others want to claim today that we have watches, and maybe we don't have to be that concerned about when, if we know exactly it is after our Alos. But the meaning anyway is l'chadchil, we still wait until Neit Tzachama, sunrise. So what happened to the night kriya? So apparently that was a later, that the Mishnah doesn't mention about the night kriya. So apparently it was a later institution doing the night kriya. Not that much later, I might add, because the Gemara talks about it. The Gemara already talks about reading the Megillah at night as well as during the day. But in the Mishnah, so either some say, well, it was always there, the Mishnah didn't mention it, or some say, no, it was later. And either way, the villages would be stuck, because they couldn't, unless you held that you could read the Megillah, it's a machokas in the Gemara whether you could do Megillah by yourself. So unless they read, I guess for those who are able to, you could just take out a Megillah and read it by yourself at night. But the Mishnah doesn't mention anything about, which leads Achronim to discuss perhaps the night kriya and was a later institution, and we'll get into different. There could be some major. That's why, according to everybody, everyone agrees you should hear both kriyas, but the ikar kriya is during the day. Many people make the mistake, it's not a mistake, the mistake isn't coming at night, the mistake is not coming the next morning, you have to come at night also, but there seem to be a lot more people hearing the Megillah at night. I'll take the night versus nothing, but if you're gonna, really you should do both, but the yom is, the ikar is probably divrei Kabbalah, while nighttime I only be midrabanan, a later institution. So either way, that's the machlokas Rashi, Tosafos, which might be a machlokas Bavli Yerushalmi. There's an interesting Chazon Ish. So we know, as we mentioned, 14th is the day for Megillah for the cities, and for walled cities in the time of Yeshua ben Nun, that's the 15th. Why walled cities in the time of Yeshua ben Nun? Why was that the Koveya? Why not walled cities in the time of Achashverosh? Isn't that when Purim happened? Why do we care about a walled city for the time of when Yeshua went into Eretz Yisrael for? So I think the Yerushalmi writes, the Bavli has a discussion like that. Maybe it should be Achashverosh. We conclude we go by Yeshua ben Nun. Why? L'chale kavod le'eretz Yisrael. We want to give kavod because during that time, Eretz Yisrael was not, I wouldn't say it was desolate, but wasn't built up, it wasn't a walled city. Okay, there's a further discussion, what's a walled city? Is a walled city just walled? Was it fortified? Those are details within what a walled city meant. But in order to give kavod to Eretz Yisrael, we said from a walled city to the time of Yeshua ben Nun. Others point out also, Yoshua was the first one to fight Amalek. So therefore it's fitting also the Purim story, Haman, etc. So therefore as well we go by the time of Yeshua ben Nun. But either way, that's the halacha, that we go by a walled city during the time of Yeshua ben Nun. The Gemara lists different cities which were Safek Muchus Chama. Some cities we know they were walled, but we don't know if they had the definition of a walled city. Others we don't know. And there's certain cities today have that issue, or they claim to be a Safek Muchus Chama. We'll have to get into another time when do they actually read the Megillah. But so the Chazon Ish has an interesting discussion. We know, so let's say a person's traveling, so they're going all over, Tel Aviv, Petach Tikva, Haifa, Yerushalayim, and they're traveling between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, between the 14th and 15th. What day is Purim for them? Like, is there a set day? Like, what's the Koveya? What's the Koveya for Purim? Could I have two Purims? Could I have no Purims? Could I have one Purim? So the Chazon Ish says all of the above. It depends so he says, the Chazon Ish says it goes on the morning of that day. So if on the 14th at Alos HaShachar, you are outside of Yerushalayim, you are chayev to celebrate Purim that day, independently. And the 15th, if you happen to be in Yerushalayim on the 15th at Alos HaShachar, you are chayev to celebrate. So according to Chazon Ish, you could be chayev on Purim 2 days, and conversely, if you don't like Purim, you could be on the 15th in Tel Aviv, and the 4th. He's not recommending you do that. That's a separate problem. We don't try to put ourselves in situations where we avoid doing a mitzvah. Obviously, minimally, you should go out of your way to make sure you celebrate one day of Purim, minimally. I know there are many people who are very mahadir trying to get 2 days of Purim, but that you don't have to do. But minimally, according to the Chazon Ish, you should make sure on one of those days you are chayev and Purim. Else, technically you might be exempt, but the bottom line is you haven't fulfilled your mitzvah Megillah then. And however, that's not the consensus view. The consensus view is like the Mishnah Berurah, other posts can bring down. No, wherever you are, the 14th in the morning, Purim is one package deal. The 14th and 15th. Wherever you are, the 14th day in the morning, that determines when your Purim is. So if you're in Yerushalayim on the 4th till the 15th is your day. It doesn't make a difference. You can run far away. It doesn't take a difference. You chayev to celebrate Purim.
You remember where you were.
Exactly. That's not so easy on Purim. But you have to remember where you are. Even though I don't want to get into it now, really, the mitzvah is not really drinking at night either. That's a separate issue. And really, the mitzvah is yayin during the Suda, but that's a separate shir on Shalach Manas and the mitzvah of drinking. But the consensus view is, and in fact, that's the Mumkacher. The Mumkacher writes, is the same idea, and this is what the famous Chacham Tzvi, that someone comes to Eretz Yisrael to visit for Yantif. So he wants to say, like the Chacham Tzvi, that So if you're in Eretz Yisrael, the first day, whatever, Sukkot Pesach, you are Koveya as a resident of Eretz Yisrael, and you only have to keep one day. That's the opinion of the Chacham Tzvi and the Mumkacher. That's not the consensus view. The Machaber, the Yosef Karo brings down the Shulchan Aruch, and many the road posts can bring down for an American or Canadian, they should keep 2 days, even though it's becoming a lot more popular for North Americans to go over to keep 1 day. But speak to your local posting for your own personal psak. But those are the two schools of thought in terms of Rav Soloveitchik used to. He actually had a chumrah. He used to say 1.5. You definitely don't want 1.5. What do you mean 1.5? 1.5 means basically he felt that you keep 1 day of. So it depends. It depends if you're a balabas or a ben Torah. If you're a balabas, he used to tell them, okay, just keep 1 day. But if you're a ben Torah, he used to tell you to keep 1.5. Because what do you mean 1.5? Everyone says you have to keep the first day. That's not on the table. But the second day you have to take all the chumras. So he says you have to put on tefillin. He goes. You can't do malacha. So that's the hardest thing to do is 1.5 days. So that's why Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, perhaps his Talmud also goes with 1.5 days. So that's the hardest one to do. The standard is 2. 1.5 is probably even less popular than 1, because that's probably the hardest thing to do, because you're in yontiv mode and you're in chol hamoed mode at the same time. It's difficult probably. I've never done my minute I always kept 2 when I was there. It's probably hard to keep 1.5, the chumras of each. So to summarize, is that we discussed the machlokes, Rashi and Tosfos, that when the villagers go in on the Yom HaKnisa, who reads the Megillah for them? According to Rashi, it's the people of the city, B'nai Yair. According to Rashi, how could they? They're not mechuyev b'davar. It's B'nai HaKfarim. So how could they read it? So they have to get together on the Yom HaKnisa, etc. And we pointed out it's a machlokes how you define mechuyev b'davar. And then we had the machlokes Chaz and Mishnah Berurah. What's the Koveya Purim? Is it where you are in the 14th period, or each day with your own Koveya? So the Gemara tells us in Megillah, why don't we say Hallel on Purim? Because we know, generally speaking, on a Yontiv we say Hallel, and as well, Chanukah and Purim are very similar in many ways, and Chanukah is the day we say Hallel every day of Chanukah, 8 days. So why by Chanukah do we say Hallel, but by Purim there is no Hallel? So the Gemara in Megillah and other places gives 3 reasons why we don't say Hallel on Purim. So the first reason the Gemara gives, or one of the reasons the Gemara gives, is it was a nace that happened in Chutz La'aretz. By Chanukah, the miracle was by the Beis HaMikdash in Eretz Yisrael. But by Purim, the mitzvah was in Chutz La'aretz. And therefore, we only warrant to say Hallel on a miracle that happened in Eretz Yisrael and not in Chutz La'aretz. So the obvious question is, last I checked, Yetzias Mitzrayim happened from Egypt and not from Eretz Yisrael, so what do you mean? We say Hallel all the time. So why is it that we don't say, so why is that, how come that's not a problem? So the Gemara gives the old grandfather clause, that obviously before you had Eretz Yisrael, before Yoshua conquered Eretz Yisrael, so obviously the fact that the nace happened out of Israel wouldn't be a factor. It's only once after Yoshua conquered the Sheva Shekivshu, the Sheva Shekilchu, the 14 years, so then Eretz Yisrael became the spot for miracles, spots for Hallel, and therefore one of the prerequisites for saying Hallel is there has to be a nace that happened in Eretz Yisrael. So Purim is in Chutz La'aretz, Hallel in Eretz Yisrael. That's answer number 1. Answer number 2 is Kriyasa Zu Halela, that the reading we do say Hallel is a different type of Hallel. Kriyas HaMegillah Zu Halela. The Megillah reading equals Hallel. And therefore, that's the reason why we don't say Hallel, because we already have a Hallel, we read the Megillah. Megillah is Persumei Nisa, we publicize the miracle. Hallel is praising in God, so therefore Kriyas Megillah takes the place of Hallel. And the answer number 3 the Gemara gives is Akate Ade Achashverosh Haman. It's true that we were free, we survived the Gzeira of Haman, Lahashmid, Ulaharag, as called Yud and Tav V'Nashim, who was still under the domain of Achashverosh, and therefore we can only say Hallel, we're in the state of Avdei Hashem and not Avdei Achashverosh. So that's the 3 reasons the Gemara gives why there's no Hallel on Purim. Either could happen in Chutz La'aretz, Kriyasa Zu Halela, or number 3, because Akate Avdei Achashverosh. My nafkamina, what's the practical difference between any of the reasons? And number 1, we only would say Purim isn't a day for Hallel. Since it's not a miracle that happened in Eretz Yisrael, it doesn't even warrant a Hallel. So too, answer number 3. We're already in the state of Avdei Hashem, so therefore we can't begin to say Hallel. Answer number 2 is saying it is a day to say Hallel. But we already sang Hallel in Kriyas Megillah, and therefore we don't say it. In fact, it's a famous Meiri. The Meiri asks, what happens if you live in a town, in a place where there is no access to Megillas Esther, and for some reason you can't get a Megillah to read, but you do have a prayer book, you do have a siddur. So the question is, should one say Hallel if you can't say Kriyas Megillah? So the Meiri writes, according to answer number 2, if you take it to its logical extension, so then one should say Hallel, because really Purim is the day to say Hallel. Kriyas Megillah is the first choice. If you can't do the Megillah, so you do Hallel. That's what the Meiri writes, that if you don't do Hallel, if you don't read the Megillah, so you could say Hallel. And it's very logical. The problem is we don't pass like this Meiri. We pass, even if you're in a town where there's no Megillah, there is no Hallel. So what's the pshat? How come? Why do we disagree with the Meiri? The Meiri seems to be very logical, that we don't say Hallel. That we don't say Hallel because of the Megillah, but if we're not going to read the Megillah, we should say Hallel. So the Achronim point out, because there's a fundamental difference between the Hallel, the classical, what we call Hallel HaMitzri, the Hallel we say, and the Hallel of the Kriyas HaMegillah. That the Hallel HaMitzri is the classical HaKadosh Baruch Hu breaking the laws of Teva. As we know, like for the 40 years in the Midbar, they lived under Nisim. When they entered Eretz Yisrael, they said to Yoshua, told them, you know what, you're going to have to start working for a living. You've got to start planting, harvesting, etc. And they said, what? From a little seed, a big tree's going to grow? Or this plant's going to grow? Wow, what a miracle. In other words, they went from seeing miracles through the Nisim, the flows of God breaking the laws of Teva, to doing it through a natural way. In fact, that's what the famous Meshach Chachma points out. The apparent steer between the Gemara and Brachas, the Gemara and Shabbos. The Gemara and Brachas says one who says Ashrei 3 times a day is Zocheh to Olam Haba. Yet the Gemara says in Shabbos, Kol Ova Halo V'chol Yom Areza Megadev V'Macharev. Whoever says Halo every day, it's like you're a blasphemy, you're cursing out God. And the Rishonim say it doesn't even mean every day, it means any day where you're not supposed to be saying it. So how do we reconcile? Last I checked, Ashrei comes from Tehillim, and Hallel comes from Tehillim. So what is it? Am I good or not? So that's what the Meshach Chachma points out. That no, that when you say Hallel HaMitzri, that's a Nisim Nefol. So what you see from God is from the miracles. God, when you do a miracle, I'll believe. So then you're a Magadev or Macharev. But the Ashrei is Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Daled. You see God in the everyday form, the things we have in common with behemoths, eating, drinking, etc. Therefore, if you see God in the everyday life, then that's the attitude that you're going to be Zocheh to Olam Haba. But if you only see God in Nisim, then forget about it. So that's the pshat here, So that's the pshat. That really, Meiri seems very logical. If there is no Megillah, we should say the Hallel. And the answer is no. Chazal instituted a special Hallel. The Hallel of Megillas Esther, which isn't the open Nisan Nigos, but it's Megillas Esther, Hasti Aponim, the only book in Tanakh, without God's name mentioned. Because we're showing how God rules the world through Derech HaTeva. And that's what the Megillas Esther is all about. One long coincidence to appear to realize it's God's Hashkacha, and therefore a Hallel HaMitzvah is inappropriate on this day. That's not that Purim isn't the day of Nisan the flows, but Purim is the day of seeing God through the Derech HaTeva, through the everyday miracles. And that's why we don't pass them like the Meiri, that even in a town where there is no Megillah reading, we also would not. The Mishnah and Megillah on that Yud Tes discusses a machlokus, a dispute between Rabbi Yehuda and the Tana Kama on whether a katan can be motzi a gadol regarding the mitzvah of Priyas HaMegillah. Again, you have a katan Baal Koreh reading the Megillah and do the mitzvah, read the mitzvah on behalf of the Gedolim. So the Tana Kama say no. Hakol ksherim chutz lecheresh shote v'katan. Obviously here a cheresh, we're talking about one who is medaber eino shameya, or else there's nothing to talk about if he's eino medaber eino shameya. A shot is someone who's insane. And a katan cannot read the Megillah. That's the Tana Kama. And Rabbi Yehuda makshir katan. Rabbi Yehuda says a katan can read the Megillah for a gadol. What's the nekudas hamachokes? Why, according to the Tana Kama, a katan no, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, katan yes? So Tosfos, in the long Tosfos, Yud Beis, deals with the issue. What kind of katan are we talking about? If we're talking about a katan she'einu higil l'chinuch, she'lo higil l'chinuch, he's 3, 4, 5. So obviously, how could Rabbi Yehuda say he's makshir? He's not mechuyev b'davar. And if we're talking about a katan she'higil l'chinuch, so he's chayim midrabanan, Megillah is only drabanan. Why can't a katan do it for a gadol? So that's Tosfos in a bind. But then Tosfos concludes, he introduces a new concept called a trade rabbanan. That not only is a katan only chayim midrabanan al tchinuch, but Megillah is also drabanan versus a gadol has this one drabanan of kriyas HaMegillah. So a trade rabbanan cannot be motzi echad rabbanan. Apparently, Rabbi Yehuda is cholek on that concept. There is no difference in a trade rabbanan and echad rabbanan. So that's the way Tosfos learned the issue. The Ramban, elsewhere in Brachas, and it's a famous machlokas Rishonim in general, who is the chiyuv of chinachan? Is it on the child or is it on the father? So the Ramban writes that the chiyuv chinuch is on the father. So the katan's not chayiv at all. So it's not even din d'rabbanan. He's not chayiv at all. He can't do the mitzvah of someone who has a din d'rabbanan. And perhaps another way of explaining the machlokas, that's what the Achronim, the Turei Even, the Yehuda, others, that one perhaps could argue that Kriyas HaMegillah is not a mitzvah midrabanan. We know there are different levels. There's a mitzvah daraisa, there are mitzvahs midrabanan, and then they call me divrei Kabbalah from the words of the prophet. Since Megillah Esther comes from Megillah Esther, so it's divrei Kabbalah. That's a whole discussion. The Gemara says divrei, in Rosh Hashanah it says divrei Kabbalah ke divrei Torah dami. That's the question if it's only regarding chizuk, or it's a general qual of divrei Kabbalah Kedivrei Torah dami. So perhaps if you hold Kriyas HaMegillah is Kedivrei Kabbalah, so that's why a katan is only chayim midrabanan, but a gadol is obligated midivrei Kabbalah, and therefore perhaps it would come out then if you assume there's a difference between the Megillah reading at night, which is only drabanan, versus the Megillah reading during the day. So then a katan potentially could read the Megillah at night, but not during the day. In fact, that's I know someone who had twins, and they had a bar mitzvah, so one read the parasha, they didn't read parasha Zachar, and I believe it was Rabbi Willig's kids, and they didn't read parasha Zachar because of Chazaka the Rabbi, that maybe on a din d'Rabbanan we're lenient to say that a bar mitzvah boy is a gadol, but we don't rely on din d'Oraisa. And apparently, I heard, I don't know, I can't confirm this, that the other twin read the Megillah at night, not during the day. He was assuming on the Kula that Megillah reading at night is only midrabanan. So it's only midrabanan, then a katan can lane for, well, he's not a katan. He was a bar mitzvah boy, and therefore bar mitzvah boy we could rely on the chazaka, and therefore he could read the Megillah at night. That's also a similar issue that Shuri Evan raises regarding the Bahag, that Tosas writes, the Gemara writes, Dashim Chayavas Mikra Megillah, and Tosas writes, based on this, a woman should be able to read the Megillah for a man, but he quotes the Bahag who says no. So the question is, why not? So there are many reasons given. One is that perhaps a woman is only Chayav Midrabanan, based on Afhein Hayu Ba'usa Nes, but not based on Divrei Kabbalah, and therefore a man's on a higher level, Divrei Kabbalah. A woman midrabanan, so someone midrabanan can't do the mitzvah for someone midivrei Kabbalah. And according, if this is true, so then again, so the nighttime perhaps there's more room to discuss a woman reading for a man when there is, well, if there are no men who could do it, so you could use a woman meyikar adin, but that as well we could discuss if it was only midrabanan, so then there's perhaps a difference between a woman reading the Megillah for men at night versus during the day. And then as well there was the issue of the Shachiyanu, because Tosas points out in Megillah that even though we read the Megillah at night, nevertheless we make a new Shachiyanu during the day, because that's the Iker mitzvah for Sumei Nisa. And the Rambam is cholek that there is no Shachiyanu during the day. Once you make the Shachiyanu at night, that covers you. That's the Macholkes, the Machaber Amat, Svardim and Ashkenaz. So what's in the Kudas HaMacholkes? That's what the issue could be, is this issue in terms of, if you assume that the night Kriya and the day Kriya are the same, so therefore one Shachiyanu covers all, but if you assume that the night Kriya is D'Rabbanan and the day Kriya is Divrei Kabbalah, so regarding Divrei Kabbalah, it's the first time you're doing the mitzvah. The first time you're doing the mitzvah, you go ahead and make a new Shachiyanu. So those are some of the issues regarding the different issues that tie in to these questions of whether a katan can read the Megillah for a man, whether a woman can read it for a man, whether a bar mitzvah boy could read Parashat Zachar or Kriyas Megillah. Parashat Zachar is D'Oraisa, but reading the Megillah, and the issue of making the brachas of Shachiyanu, perhaps, or making a second bracha Shachiyanu, because on a mitzvah d'Rabbanan we do make, that depends on these issues here, and that's how we started. That's the machlokes here between the Tana Kama and Rabbi Yehuda. Either it's based on, as Tosas writes, a trade Rabbanan, that's why Tana Kama argue on Rabbi Yehuda, or like the Ramban, Katan's not chayav at all, or like the other Achronim, that perhaps that a gadol is chayav midivrei Kabbalah, a katan is only chayav midrabanan, and therefore a katan cannot read the Megillah for a gadol.